Now, Thomas Cookson review for The Two Doctors, published on the 12th of the 10th, 14, License to Kill. This is one last AD story I must reckon with, but not necessarily to bury it. Tom May has nailed how this was likely a vague attempt to make a classic story. Unfortunately, J&T by now defined classic as the twin dilemma, but J&T knew what fandom apparently wanted, which is Robert Holmes in continuity. There was no particular occasion for a multi-Doctor story here, only 2 years after the last one. I think it came about because Patrick Troughton was still keen on playing the character again. On those grounds, there's no reason it should have been out of the question, and I doubt many fans would hand on heart say we should have been denied this story given it was Pat's last performance in the role. Even I have trouble maintaining my it should have ended in Oligopolis/Castrovalva stance when I think of that. So we have a conflict between fandom's self-loathing compulsion to bash continuity fan service against their respect for one of the show's most beloved lead actors' last performances before he died. Sure, John Pertwee's last performance hardly makes mentions in Timekeeper, but this is different. As a continuity exercise, it makes more sense for an Arc of Infinity or Warriors of the Deep did. The Sontarans are pretty self-explanatory to non-fans, and a multi-Doctor story would make sense to viewers who freshly remembered the 5 Doctors and Davison's regeneration. Bringing back the Sontarans might have been redundant if the Invasion of Time had been their finest hour, but it wasn't, so there was more you could still do with the Sontarans. In fact, this could have done for the Sontarans what Earthshock did for the Cybermen. After all, Season 22 is less a natural successor or continuation to Season 21, and more a Season 19 redux. J&T's concern over recasting the Doctor after Tom Baker was whether audiences would accept the new guy or even see this as the same show. The solution was to focus on continuity, surrounding Davison with familiar foes to corroborate his credentials, but having his enemies still recognize him as the Doctor. Asserting that the show's past was bigger than Tom Baker, so after Tom Baker's departure to dismal ratings, Season 19 saved the show, yet simultaneously damned it. This continuity fixation should have ended in 1983 with Resurrection of the Daleks and the 5 Doctors at the latest. Unfortunately, the former was postponed a year, but Season 21 felt like the endgame, hopefully bringing the continuity to completion before passing the torch to a new incumbent with more distance from Tom Baker's shadow. Rather than letting this new Doctor carry the show, without the crutch of continuity, they chickened out. Maybe J&T had an inflated opinion of how beloved Davison was, thinking Colin had now had Davison's shadow to overcome. Sure, J&T knew that some convention goers, and even his own bitchy boyfriend, considered Davison bland, but he'd been beside Davison when promoting the show on chat shows and knew Davison was, for many, the face of the Doctor. So Season 22 gets heavy flack for its gratuitous continuity, not for being any more offensive or nonsensical about it than Davison's era was, but because it wasn't the fresh start we were unspokenly promised. So what do I think of the 2 Doctors? Well, when I was watching this story during an online marathon, I realised it really was a cut above Season 22's usual crop. Plenty of fans who hate Colin's era would consider this one story they'd gladly keep. Many other fans claim it put the biggest stake through the show's heart, precisely because all hopes rested on this combo of Holmes and Troughton. After all, if they couldn't save this era, nothing could. My own view goes back and forth. I hate how this story valorizes fandom's view that some Lost Cause 80 stories were actually salvageable, feeling the production and directing had been up to scratch. It's actually true here, but I think this and Terminus are the only times where it is. No Hollywood production values could save Time Flight or Warriors of the Deep from being rotten through and through. This script is different. It's very promising and should have been nothing if not satisfying. It's actually lavishly produced, but the director isn't in sync with the tone, or rather, a really good director could pull its problematic tone together, but Peter Moffat ain't the man for the job. On paper, Peter Moffat should have been a good choice. When directing State of Decay, he'd aggressively fought against Bidmead for the integrity of Terence Dick's vision, so equally he should have been in touch with what macabre tone Holmes was aiming for here. Peter Moffat was rather the unsung hero behind the scenes of State of Decay, even taking time to sympathetically work through Tom and Lala's issues. I'll probably go to my grave, cursing how in a perfect world he'd have gotten the producer's job in 1980 instead. He'd done a fairly sturdy job on the 5 Doctors, so he was the natural choice for the next multi-Doctor story. He not only worked with Patrick Troughton before, but he demonstrated a good flair for maintaining the momentum of adventures split between separate parties on different routes to the same crest. But this story feels merely gimmicky, like a typical Doctor Who story that's been split in 2. It doesn't feel like a proper multi-Doctor special, so what works about the story and what doesn't? Well, compared to stories preceding it, it shows a rapid curve of improvement in certain areas. It suffers from similar pacing problems as Mark of the Rani, but what feels its stretched runtime is far more substantial and engaging. Also at a stretched length, you'd have time to really notice if it was a sloppy or half-finished an effort, as Attack of the Cybermen or Vengeance on Varos was, and it clearly isn't. It holds together narratively very well, and in some ways preempts some of the timey-wimey business of Moffat's era. In fact, the scenes where the Sixth Doctor undergoes self-hypnosis to find his abducted second incarnation or begins succumbing to the androgam conditioning of his earlier self seem like a forerunner to A Christmas Carol and The Girl Who Waited. Where it is sloppy, of course, is in terms of canon continuity. So sloppy, in fact, that it birthed the Season 6B theory. This leads me to the conclusion that the JNT era wasn't really more accurate with continuity than the show had been before. It simply adopted that pretext as a propaganda tool that many fans swallowed, having wearied of the more flippant way continuity was handled under Douglas Adams. It wasn't so much about getting the facts right as feigning newly defined facts that are suddenly made out to be how they've always been, which is in keeping with JNT's tabloid sensibilities. The focus on solidity of production value complemented the sense of watching a block universe of a set timeline. What the story really has going for it, though, are its characters. See in Attack of the Cybermen, I thought Lytton's gang were fairly witty characters, but then I realised that beyond this, there's nothing to them. Even despite Terry Malloy bringing a lot to Russell's character, he's actually only there to deliver exposition about Lytton, then get killed off. Vengeance on Varys, like I said, feels half-finished. While Still and the Governor are brilliantly drawn, it's a story in which the ciphers far outnumber genuine characters. Shockeye feels authentically real and driven by animal instincts in a way that gives him a genuine visceral presence in danger. The man is volatile. Chessine, likewise, is a dark nature all her own that breeds inner turmoil within her. Oscar and Donna are a sweet and awkward but likeable couple, so it genuinely hurts when death strikes them. Even minor victims like the blind woman become people because of Chessine's telepathic reading of who she was and what thoughts and beliefs dominated her mind. Dastari is a bit on the limp side, but even his arc from turncoat to redeemed figure feels organic and believable. The Sontarans are wasted, though, yet again undisabled. The Doctor needn't do much to overcome adversity when the villains are already destroying each other anyway. It might mean this is a cut above Season 22 because our points of character interest aren't solely on the toxic Sixth Doctor and Perry relationship, but overall the character decisions are real and engaging and lead to genuine predicaments and sharp danger and visceral sensations, making this much more involving and rewarding to watch. But the afterviewing does leave a nasty aftertaste. From first watching this, I've always had problems with the fascistic assertion that androgams can't be enlightened or redeemed because savagery is in their blood. Now I can enjoy the Planet of the Apes films without being bothered by its portrayal of a racially segregated caste system, with the gorillas being good-for-nothing thugs of the military who are considered stupid savages by the more enlightened higher-up chimpanzees and orangutans. Maybe because we expect that kind of hierarchy of intelligence to the animal kingdom. This is different and far uglier because it actually rules out the idea that intelligence can redeem the lower castes. The idea of arbitrarily cutting off someone's humanity and consigning them to a subhuman level just because of their race. No wonder Lawrence Miles is going to praise it in About Time 6. It's not quite Warriors of the Deep, where the Doctor outright tells the human victims of ethnic cleansing there are a lesser species who have it coming just for existing, but it's close. It's about rendering the androgams defenseless and powerless and describing how their lives carry less value. Perhaps this is a continuation of Holmes' evisceration of criminal culture in The Caves of Androzani, that there exists a violent lumpen proletariat who can't be rehabilitated. That's a common view for a cynical ex-policeman. Is he wrong? I certainly believe some violent criminals or sex offenders can never be rehabilitated, but their intellect only makes them more manipulative and dangerous. But framed in species terms, it comes off as racist and fascistic, for a part of me suspects Robert Holmes intended the androgams as more a universal metaphor for the human psyche and our darker, greedy, malicious desires that we repress, but typical of J&D's era, it comes off as too literal-minded to work. As for Shockeye's death, I doubt anyone can seriously argue that a dangerous beast like Shockeye didn't need putting down after killing Oscar without sounding idiotic. What choice did the Doctor have? James Bond or Indiana Jones films featured plenty of cartoonish happy kills of bad guys. Robert Holmes often specialised in them. See Terror of the Autons and the Sunmakers. I was somewhat glad we got away from this in the Davison era, where everything became a serious matter, until I realised that what replaced it was actually far worse. Dwelling on villains' screaming, corroding, dying moments, going for forced ugly repulsion to emotionally bully our sympathies for reprehensible scumbags. Happy kills are slick and dealt with quickly, but an upsetting villain's death that provokes sympathy only works if you're technically exemplary at it. Good examples being Blade Runner and Das Boot. Holmes is going for the former, but Moffat films it as the latter, lingeringly, horribly, producing an ugly mix, like Cassandra's death except in reverse. In terms of the Doctor's Van Helsing role of vanquishing evil by any means, there's no symbolism here, no potions, no alchemy, just cyanide, a real-life murder weapon, too easy, too close to home. Overall, it's Holmes writing the best Chibnall story that Chibnall never wrote. It's countryside with wit and imagination, and Patton Fraser's double act. From that you can gauge why it's a cut above Season 22, yet far less than we'd expect or want from Holmes.